Hi, I'm Laura.
Hey, I'm Stefan, and you're listening to Attributed, a podcast library by Dreamdata.
The purpose of it is to store and share all the knowledge that we have gathered across Dreamdata employees through our LinkedIn Lives, podcasts, and webinars.
The typical topics you'll find here can be stuff like marketing,
Sales,
B2B ads,
operations,
social selling maybe. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Attributed session, let's call it a podcast, a show with B2B marketers delivered by Dreamdata. And today I'm really excited to have Timi Olotu joining me today. One, because you were heavily recommended by Alex Venus, which I formerly interviewed, and I hold a very high esteem when it comes to marketing. But also, Timi, because when we chatted about what topics to go for, you didn't want to talk about anything seasonal or hyped or anything like that. You actually answered what I typically answer as well when I'm asked about what's the trick you'd recommend? And it's succeeding continuously is rarely about the latest trend. It's probably much more about being consistent about some classical stuff that works. And hopefully this is what we're going to touch upon today. But before we get started, Timmy, I think it's good for everybody to just maybe hear from yourself a little bit about who you are and why you in a go-to-market session would have a lot of interesting insights to share.
Thank you, Stefan. Very excited to be here as well. Both of us are fans of Alex Venus, so let's see if we could do him proud. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at CharlieHR. At our company, that means that I'm responsible for sales, marketing, and some of our go-to-market product functions and elements. In a broader sense, in terms of how those things fit together, it just means I'm responsible for understanding how we uncover and exploit monetizable value in our market. So what do people care about? What do they care about enough that they will pay to access it? And then how do we compete to win the privilege and responsibility of being their preferred choice in meeting those needs? Hopefully it's quite clear how product marketing and sales can fit into that process. And of course, I work cross-functionally as well, even with teams that I don't line manage, like customer success, etc. Why am I here talking about this subject? I feel very grateful that I get to do a job that I really love and I'm intuitively and intrinsically extremely curious about. So I find business to be one of the ultimate games, one of the ultimate puzzles, because there's a lot of intellectual exploration, but also a lot of practical execution. So you can get me talking forever about this subject. And also, I think because I had quite a meandering and unusual route to the role I currently have, I think I've picked up certain nuances to business that not many people in my position have. And I hope to share some of those today.
Super nice, Timmy. And because we're probably going to be speaking quite a bit about CharlieHR, maybe could you just define, like, when you pull up your ICP slide and your persona slide and value proposition slides, how does that typically look like for CharlieHR? Then we know that as we move along the different kind of things here.
Sure. So like many businesses, we have different types of customers that use CharlieHR. But there's a clear sort of front runner when it comes to that balance of value exchange for money. So what I mean by that is who gets the most value from CharlieHR and who pays CharlieHR the most money over time in order to access that value. I think that's a very specific lens to which to answer the question, what's your ICP? And when we layered on that lens, which was based on excellent work done by one of our great product managers, there was a clear answer. And that answer is it's usually small UK businesses where the founder or someone in the C-suite or leadership position is still in charge of HR. So they're still wearing many hats, and HR is one of them. And when I say small, I mean really small. I mean fewer than 50 employees, 30 or below really, which is an unusual focus for HR software companies, but work
Yeah.
really well for us for a bunch of reasons. So that's essentially our ICP. There are lots of personas that use CharlieHR,
Yeah.
but we've gotten really laser focused on that audience.
Yeah. That's super interesting. I guess it's quite smart that it hinges on the CEO or founder, which rarely tends to churn. Whereas some of the other peoples in function in that size of company, the marketers, the salespeople, they would probably be transitioning every second or third year. You can probably sense that this is something that we've experienced and why we're trying to move a bit more north. So when one person leaves, then we don't have to do a resell. But I'm guessing, Tim, and correct me if I'm wrong, that founders and CEOs, they don't change jobs as often as a marketer or a salesperson do.
You're absolutely correct. We sort of commercial professionals, our roles are a lot more precarious, and even the HR professional. But I should clarify, it wasn't actually by design in the sense that we didn't necessarily say, oh, we're going to serve the founder instead of the HR director. Part of it was by design in the sense that we understood that small UK businesses, usually in tech or agencies, are our sweet spot. But the reason why it's turned out that way is that in small companies, they rarely have the resources to go and hire a bunch of, senior leaders across functions.
Yeah.
And at that size, especially in the UK, the CEO is still probably doing a bit of sales, a bit of HR, etc. But you're absolutely right. That gives us an advantage. And I think it's one of the reasons why we've been able to be successful at this bottom end of the market when others struggle, is that the CEOs don't turn over as much.
Yeah.
And they tend to have buying decision-making power for a broad range of things.
I'm always hyper interested in all the go-to-market tactics, so I'm eager to move there to hear what it is that you guys are doing that works well. But before getting specific, I would love to hear kind of like now you're like a chief revenue officer. I would love to hear kind of your like overall, like when the big picture of when you think about your go-to-market philosophy, or what should we call it? What are the different kinds of ducks that needs to get in row for it to be successful?
Gotcha. So before I answer this, I'll frame it a bit. I tend to focus on the sort of a personal obsession
Yeah.
is the simplest possible answer that I can give to a question. And when I take that lens to, when I apply it to my go to market philosophy, I would say it's as simple as focus on value, the operational words being focus and value. And I think those are two ingredients that are often missing in a lot of teams. They seem obvious, but they're often missing. And the reason why is when we talk about value and focus, it's easy to give superficial answers. I can ask you, oh, what's your focus? And you can say, oh, it's, we're trying to acquire marketers in Series B companies.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But if you want to be really excellent at GTM, you have to go a lot deeper than that. You have to understand, okay, what is it about marketers that makes them right for you? What is it about Series B? What are the specific needs? Why those needs? And then when we talk about value, you can go to a level of depth about why is something desirable to an audience and what is the matrix of desires that exist for that audience and what are the relationships between them and how do you exploit that. I find that when you're able to pinpoint exactly what people find valuable, a specific group, why they find it valuable and why you're the right company to deliver that value, and you can focus on it for a long time, it's very hard to be unsuccessful.
That's nice. Yeah, I think it's funny that you say this. I haven't talked so much about the value component, but typically when I go out and talk to other marketers, I always talk about define your ideal customer profile. If you haven't done that, stop what you're working on, get the company rattled together and write it down. Who are we trying to target? Because then all the other decisions you have to make afterwards will become a lot simpler, because you can always pull up that definition of who are we trying to target. And if it's not fitting those people, then, well, there's no need in spending time on it.
I agree. I think another reason is why companies struggle with this, because it's one of those things, as fundamentals often are, they sound simple in theory. And I think they are simple, but they're not easy to execute. I think one of the issues is when we talk about defining an ideal customer profile, a lot of teams in companies do this in a very limited way. So, for example, a specific team, let's say sales or marketing or product, might look at the customer base through the lens of just their function. Like,
Yeah.
oh, who do we like using the product? Or who do we sell to the most? Because it can
Yeah.
happen
Yeah.
where the kinds of buyers that the sales team closes most often are not necessarily the ones that are most successful with the product.
Yeah.
And the kinds of audiences the marketers attract are not necessarily the ones that are most successful in the long term, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it requires that ability to combine functions within the business, the buyer's perspectives, but also the company's perspective. You have to understand the
Yeah.
company's long-term strategy.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think ideal customer profile should be a team exercise, so everyone agrees. So whether it's whom is marketing trying to attract, or who are we trying to sell to, or who are we building product for, or who is CS fighting the hardest to keep happy, should all be the same. So everybody is pulling in the same direction.
Agreed.
Okay, so focus and value, that's one of the fundamentals. Are there more fundamentals, as we we said in the title, that comes to mind for you, Timi?
Sure. I think my journey to where I am has involved both a lot of practice. I've learned a lot on the job, but also I like theory in the sense that I like reading marketing papers, sales research, etc. I don't like theory for theory's sake. I enjoy it because I think the academics and the practitioners often have this divide, which is unfortunate because the academics are focused on figuring out very generalizable principles that generalize across audiences and are stable over time. And the practitioners are often doing the opposite. They're looking for very specific advice that
Yeah.
is that feels very tailored to their context.
Yeah.
Those things are not necessarily at odds, but they often appear that way. And I think there's a bridge between the two that's missing. And that bridge is this: it's the understanding that marketing and sales are fundamentally empirical exercises. So, what I mean by that is there are exercises that are concerned with generating knowledge through real world observations. We're looking at a market, we're seeing people buying and selling, we're trying to enter it and be one of the more successful actors in that space. You will only do that if you understand, or let me put it another way: the better you understand what is really going on when people are buying and selling, their motivations, their behaviors, etc., that you give yourself a better chance of succeeding. So, through that lens, I would say three key fundamentals that I consistently find extremely missing are evidence, experimentation, and insight.
Evidence, experimentation, and insights. Okay, let's unravel what that is.
Yeah, so I would say evidence is about ensuring that there's real world feedback that the idea on which you are basing your actions actually plays out as intended.
Mm.
So if I say, oh, spending on Amazon ads generates a 2x return, I want to make sure I have evidence that that actually generalizes well and is stable over time. This is something we marketers are very bad at because we do it for our companies. So we're not very good at spotting it when other people do it to us. You cherry pick a particular company.
Yeah.
Maybe let's say lots of companies have negative returns. One has huge returns. You average it out and you say, oh, this is how things perform. So we're not very good at scrutinizing when some new thing pops on the block. Like, is there actually evidence for this? And the second, experimentation, is about not dismissing or accepting things at face value. So you can tell me TikTok is great. Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. There's no need for me to jump to a conclusion. I can experiment myself to try and understand how things play out in my context. That's the other thing. Then the third thing is insight. I think we have a deluge of information, but how do you take that information and turn it into an exploitable understanding of a particular audience, phenomenon, tactic, whatever it may be? That is very hard. And I think the insight is a function of evidence and experimentation. And these things sound quite boring. I think a lot of people would find them that way. But what I found is a lot of the most successful teams, whether consciously or unconsciously, sometimes people just do it because it's in their personality. They have these ingredients. They're evidence-based, they experiment a lot, and they're very good at generating insights.
Yeah. I think I like the term exploitable. I haven't heard it before, but I think that's a lot how I think about. I think it's a little bit. Sometimes it's easy to forget sometimes to remember all those three components when you work. Like you get into the business as usual, and then you forget about experimenting because you found some evidence, and now you're just continuously functioning on this method. But you are not continuously looking for new channels that might also be able to, to add to your growth. That's why I love you saying it, Timi, that I have to remind my team that one, we need to continuously experiment with new stuff while also maintaining what's driving our growth today. And whenever we do something, we need to extract new insights out of it that we can kind of take into new projects. For example, right now I'm toying around with Reddit ads right now, just because I have the thesis is you can be quite specific about whatever the subreddit is called. And there's a lot of people. I should be able to get people to come from Reddit to our website and then hand us over their email at least. But I have my theory, but I'm not able to establish evidence that I'm actually able to make this happen as of now. So I really appreciate you saying this kind of those three components always needs to be present. How do you go about building a framework for your team, or how do you kind of instill that kind of those three things needs to be present at all the time with your team?
That's a good question. I think the first part is by how I behave myself. I think a lot of the root of why some of these qualities leave sales and marketing teams and GTM teams in general is because the leader sort of brings their insecurities into the process. So they feel like they're the leader, so they need to have all the answers. They need to be the most knowledgeable.
Yeah.
They need to impose themselves. I've seen this over and over again. So it's like, I have X years of experience. I've worked at this company, with this superstar and that superstar. So I have the answer. And what that does is it completely devalues these three things I'm talking about. It says, you as a team, you don't need evidence. You have me.
Yeah.
You don't need to experiment. I've already experimented. You don't need to uncover insights. I'm your insight. I'm your oracle. So I think it starts with me, and that starts by responding with curiosity. So if my team member brings an idea to me, even if I think it's not a constructive idea, my response is not, no, we shouldn't do that. It's bad. I did an X and Y and Z company and it didn't work.
Yeah.
My
And we're of an age where we have tried stuff that didn't work.
Exactly. So it's very tempting. But to respond with curiosity, why do you think this will work?
Yeah.
How do you plan to assess whether it works, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
If you trust your team, you trust their intelligence, you can trust that if you take them through that critical thinking process and it turns out their idea is bad, they will spot it. But more importantly, as a leader, you're not often doing the work yourself. So if you want to be successful, you need to make sure that your team members are able to independently run that process and are constantly getting better at it.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first part. When people see that I'm asking about evidence instead of just proffering my opinion,
Mm.
that I'm willing to analyze the situation with them, that I'm asking about insights, they realize, oh, okay, it's an incentive structure basically. If I want to get my thinking through Timi, I need to have answers to these types of questions.
Mm.
I think the second thing is the infrastructure. So you need to have the operational competencies and structures to be able to seek and exploit evidence, to be able to experiment, and to be able to generate insight. So there's things like analytics, there's things like A/B testing, there's things like desk research, there's things like surveys, etc. And perhaps most importantly, one that I think gets often missed is just spending time around your ICP, going to their events, talking to them,
Mm.
hanging with them. You build this intuitive sense that is based on data, which is not structured in the conscious mind, but it's data nonetheless. So I would say some two key components are: one, the leader models the behavior of valuing those qualities, and then you actually put the operational structure in place to be able to act, to be able to enable your team to act in line with that model.
That's super nice. I think that's really nice, nice thinking. I guess the next thing is then how do you get the team's ideas to align towards the goals or metrics set for the year as well? Then, like, and now there's the critical thinking, and then there are ideas that they come with, and then there's the overall targets that we need to hit in our company. Do you have some? How do you kind of build that bridge between the ideas and where the numbers need to go for the period?
That's a very good question. I think it's one of the trickiest parts, actually. I mean, your company's about the same size as ours, especially at this stage where you're not a child company anymore,
Yeah.
but you're not fully grown up. You still have layers to go. A lot can get lost in translation. I think the first part is to treat your team like adults. And what I mean by that is not to focus on sharing with them a sort of manicured view of the business, but instead sharing with them a real picture of it as much as you can.
Mm.
Because again, if you built your team well and it has intelligent people who are thoughtful and who care about the collective success, often simply exposure to things like what are your revenue numbers? What's your profitability like?
Mm.
How are you growing? How are your strategies panning out? Keeps them in tune in a kind of intuitive way about the overall direction of the business and the trajectory of the business. And then I would also say that you want to involve the team in the critical thinking process that generates the targets. Maybe not all of the team, but you certainly want to have a group that you
Yeah.
can do that with. That's like, here's how we're thinking about the targets. We set this number because we expect close rates in the sales team to increase by X amount and marketing to generate X amount of demos and for product to build features that eliminate these objections and reduces churn by X amount, et cetera, et cetera. So what they get at the end is not a sort of big number at the top of the tree. It's more of a composite picture
Mm.
of like, sales does this, marketing does this, product does that, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And that produces this effect. The target is just I always like to say the target is a side effect.
Yeah, I can really resonate with what you're saying and how it's not stupid people that we have on board. So they need a rationale for why the metrics or the numbers look like they do. And they need to also be able to see that it's not unreasonable numbers. We can't 5x this year. It needs to be a number that is reachable in some sense. I think that's super interesting. Maybe just before we move on, Timmy, there's George has put in a question. So maybe that I hope you're still with us, George. To what extent would you look at the prospects funding round ARR when targeting? So maybe a good place to start is to say, when you do targeting strategies at CharlieHR, how does that look like? So you talked a lot about knowing specifically who you're going for. How does that look like? And is prospects funding round and ARR one of them?
That's a good question. And I think it's an opportunity to explore this tension between the sort of academic view of GTM and the practitioner's view.
Yeah.
My answer will be you should look at the funding round or ARR if it is predictive of some consequential behavior in your audience. So, for example, for us, it is less predictive in a sense. The only thing it could be predictive of is, for example, we know that we're focused on small UK businesses. We know that companies that are in hyper growth are very likely to outgrow Charlie quicker. So if
Though if too successful is not necessarily good.
exactly, if you're an outlier company,
Yeah.
if you're growing like 300% year on year,
Yeah.
your time on Charlie will be brief. And we're okay with that.
Yeah.
Because that's not most businesses anyway. But because it's not most businesses, it's not something we look at because we're looking at the representative group, not the outliers. That's who we care about. However, I can see in some situations where that would be important. So, for example, I worked at a company called PatSnap. And at that company, we did AI patent analytics. So inventions and the R&D disclosures within them, etc. In that world, that could be interesting. And we did look at it for deep tech startups. Because if you're a deep tech startup and you're building genuinely innovative, inventive technology, your ability to actually protect and monetize and go to market with that is determined by how much money you have. So if you have a deep tech startup that doesn't have a lot of money, that isn't filing patents, probably not going to be as valuable to us. But if you're growing fast and you're building a lot of new technology, you're going to need some patent analytics. So I'd say that's the question. Can you, with evidence, identify a buyer behavior that is consequential for your buying process that can be predicted or is predicted by funding? If so, pay attention to it. If not, don't pay attention to it for the sake of it.
That makes a lot of sense. I think there's two more chapters. I would at least some more chapters I would love to go into with our talk here. The one is I don't know if you're familiar with Christoph Jans and his 5 ways to build $100 million company framework.
No, I'm not.
I'll explain it to you in just a minute. And the other one is, since you actually have this very strong copywriting background, I would like us to also talk a bit about how to go from having the defined persona to actually generating enough insights about the persona to actually producing actual copywriting afterwards. So let's start with the 5 ways to build a $100 million company, which I think Christoph Jans is this what's it called, 0.9 capital investor here in Europe. And he's basically just saying, if you're going for very small companies to get to $100 million of revenue, you need a huge pool of people. If you're selling enterprises, then you don't need that many customers because the deal size is very hard. But on top of this layer, to have like profitable cohorts or like positive customer acquisition costs, there's only certain tactics that you can be applying. So CharlieHR is in relative terms a cheap product. So you can have the world's greatest enterprise salesperson sitting there and expediting every single one that comes into the picture. So with that prelude, could you maybe tell us about what's the components? I don't know if you're afraid of disclosing too many tactics, Timi, but how does your go-to-market function work at CharlieHR? What is it that you're doing that is working quite well for you? And is there anything you tried that didn't work out where the metrics just didn't align?
Gotcha. Good question. I think I'll try and keep it high level enough that we're not giving our competitors any tools to beat us. But I think what you said is spot on. You have to tailor your go-to-market strategy with the resources of your company and the team that you have and things like that. I think for us, it starts with product. let's go to another fundamental that I really like, the 4 Ps of marketing: product, place,
That's old
price,
school.
promotion. Yeah, very old school, but I find persists in its relevance. I think product is often forgotten, but I think it's one of the first pillars you need to get right. CharlieHR, we're able to operate the way we do because we have a simple product.
Yeah.
If you think about our ICP, these founders of these small businesses wearing many hats, HR is just yet another thing on their plate.
Yeah.
They don't have time to be doing extremely complex customizations
No.
and, complex workflows and all. They don't want that. They want intelligent, relevant defaults with some customization so that they can get it off their plates as quickly as possible. Charlie's product is built with that in mind. The thing that makes us great for small companies is the thing that makes us bad for bigger companies, because at that point you do have maybe a CHRO and they have very complex visions to execute. We're not the right tool.
Yeah.
So what that also means is our product is easier to demo. It's easier to grasp. It's easier for marketing to explain. So you kind of travel down the chain, and the cost, not just monetary, but also cognitive and temporal, is reduced. And that means we can fit more demos in a day. We can optimize the way we deliver our demos. That means we can offer a free trial, and we have customers who come in, try the product, put in their card details, onboard their companies without ever speaking to us. So you travel down that chain, and the decisions that we've made about our product allow our GTM to function a certain way. So I would say, again, it needs to start with that value. It's like you understand the value that you're trying to deliver in very specific terms, and then you make trade-offs. Because hopefully it's apparent in what I'm saying. We're making trade-offs here.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get really big companies that would pay us a lot of money, and we have to say no, but we're okay with that.
Yeah. That's a tough one to say no when an attractive account comes and knocks the door. But that's where you need the alignment about who are we for and who are we not for.
Exactly. And that's where you need the evidence and the data as well, because if you don't have that, your team won't believe you.
And how does channels and acquisition costs then become, how do you think about those components in this go-to-market?
Good question. There's a complex, highly sort of idiosyncratic answer to that that's very specific to Charlie. I think that's less useful. So I'll give the more generalizable answer, which is that what we want to do is make sure that the channels we double down on show consistent improvement across a range of areas. So there's the effectiveness axis and there's the efficiency axis. So there are some channels that we try out. They're somewhat effective, but the efficiency is way off. And that's super important for us because, as you said, our deal sizes are smaller.
So you say effective and efficiencies, that doesn't mean the same, or can you maybe exemplify a bit here?
Good prompt. So effectiveness is about, can it help us achieve our stated goal? So for us, it's, for example, can it help us acquire our ICP?
Yeah.
These founders of the small UK business, etc. The efficiency axis is about our unit economics. Like, how much time is it taking internally to service this channel?
Yeah.
What's the cost per lead? What's the customer acquisition cost? What's the total reach it affords us? And so on and so forth. So sometimes when I first of all joined Charlie, we had some very efficient channels where we could generate leads at a super high volume, very low cost, but they were duds.
They were what?
They were duds. They weren't the right kinds of leads. They were the people, sometimes even in the types of companies were acquired, but didn't have the buying decision. And so the conversion rates were horrendous. And sometimes we've had highly efficient channels where we can definitely get to our ICP here, but it takes such a long time. It costs so much time, such an administrative burden. We can't continue that way.
Yeah.
So for us, it's about understanding what are the and this is unique, I should stress, within our business, what are the drivers of efficiency and what are the markers of effectiveness?
Yeah.
How do we know when something is working? And how do we know if it's not taking too much of our time and resources?
Very nice. Okay, get it. Are there any, when we talk about these channels, customer acquisition costs, etc., are there any, when you look towards the next 12 months or 24 months, is there any place that you, or any tactic that you see looks interesting that you're looking to test out, or you think in general marketers should be paying attention to at the moment?
So I think there are definitely options. So, for example, a couple of months ago, we launched a word of mouth referral program, a formal program. That's going well. It's improving month on month. So, we're going to continue to build on that across those axes that I mentioned, efficiency and effectiveness. There's some others we're exploring. We started trying out some out of home
Oh,
advertising.
So, what are we talking here?
So we're using a company called Framen.
What? One more time?
Framen.
Okay.
So anyone who works in WeWork might see one of our ads, and they have screens in WeWorks all around the country. And yeah, so they're showing our ads. We have a few more that are yet to go out in the wild that we're thinking about. But the way I think about it is I'm not actually, a lot of people say this, but I really mean it. I'm extremely tactic agnostic, partly because of my background. As you said, I started off in copywriting, then had a series of jobs before landing in my current position. What I've learned is all tactics can work.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah.
All of them can work. When I was at PatSnap, events were huge, webinars were huge, super successful, driving revenue and brand awareness. At other companies I've worked at, that wasn't the case. They didn't work so well. It was hard to get attendees. And the ones that did come, they didn't buy. So are webinars good or bad? It depends.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think the important thing I want to land is that point of experimentation. I think marketers we need to, and salespeople and product people, anyone in GTM, to be honest,
Yeah.
we need to strike a good balance of openness and rigor. So you come to me and you say, I'm trying Reddit.
Yeah.
My response should be openness. Reddit could work.
Yeah.
Then I need to bring the rigor of like, how will I know if Reddit is working?
Yeah.
Do I have the tools to assess that? What time frame am I going to use? What methodology, etc.? So I would say the answer to that question is, for me, always, always, always have a set of tactics in the backlog that you want to try, and be very rigorous about how you're going to try them, because you don't want to rest on your laurels. Keep scaling the ones that are working, but all channels have points of diminishing returns, all of them. So
Unfortunately.
you don't want to wait. And I've experienced that. It happens to a lot of companies with online ads like Google and Facebook. They try it in the beginning, it explodes. They're like, oh my God, this is it. This is the answer.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, it stops working, but they have nothing in the backlog.
Exactly. Timi, can you just because I've never tried doing a lot of out of what do you call them OOH?
OOH out of
So for this this experiment you're doing inside of WeWork, what has been the success criteria that you have put up for the experiment?
Good question. So two things are, the success criterion is basically reach and brand. I don't want to use this term. I'm going to say what I really mean.
Yeah.
The success criteria are reach and mental availability.
Yeah.
Anyone who is familiar with
Byron.
Ehrenberg Bass Institute, Byron Sharp, Jennifer Romanek, they will know that term. It's about the propensity to be thought of by your buyers in buying situations and to correctly place you in your buying category. So that is the goal, because we believe there's a lot of evidence to support the idea, both academically, but also in my experience, that if you can achieve that outcome, sales will increase.
Yeah.
So that's the outcome. In terms of how we measure it, we have some candidates, we can look at Google data. We use Google Trends data a lot,
Yeah.
although they just updated that, which is wreaking some havoc. And we're also exploring multiple ways of basically assessing, is there some increase in a certain behavior, either in the regions where we're advertising, branded search volume, stuff like that.
Super interesting. Marketing, firstly, it's about the right people and the right message. And then it's about, can we then justify and can we actually bring evidence that the initial thing that we did is working out? What are the tactical elements or kind of the crossover to the sales team here? You generate awareness, you have more mental availability of those people that are exposed to these out of office ads. What are the next things that takes play in this motion?
It's a very good question. So I think when we talk about sales and marketing alignment, a lot of people, it conjures up images of things like sales and marketing teams arguing about leads quality, and sales butchering the brand identity by building their own decks and stuff like that. I think those things are symptoms, not root causes. I think the first thing you need to go right, I'll go back to my GTM philosophy, is value. Like, is the sales team's definition and understanding of the audience and the value we bring to that audience the same as the marketing teams? Because what that allows for is efficiency in your funnel. Let me illustrate by saying, okay, your business. I say to you, Stefan, Charlie is really great for UK small businesses where the founder still has a core primary responsibility for HR. And if you're a tech company as well, we're excellent. Here's why we're excellent. We're easy to use. You won't have to do a lot of setup. There's a free trial. Our support teams are super efficient. Our SLAs are like within 30 minutes, you'll get an answer to it, etc. And then you're like, yeah, that appeals to me. And then you talk to our sales team and they're saying something different.
Yeah.
And they're going, oh, yeah, we have these super powerful features. And, you can customize it to the degree that you want. And you can build all these super heavy integrations and so on and so forth. And you're like, okay, that's cool. But I sort of thought you were about something different. That's a very invisible disconnect that I think happens a lot. That's an extreme example, but it happens in more subtle ways. So I think the handover is about having alignment about what the value proposition is, not at a high level in a deck from leadership, but in a very practical, down in the dirt, day-to-day sense. What are we saying to our buyers? Why are we confident that that's what they need to hear? Why are we confident that we can deliver it? And how do we present the evidence of that? I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing is operational. It's like your CRM processes, your integration. So for us, a lot of what we do is we automate heavily because our deal sizes are quite small. So someone signs up for a free trial, the data automatically goes into HubSpot, the deal is automatically created, demos are automatically set up, Gong records our demos, pulls out details that are pushed back into our CRM,
Nice. Yeah.
etc. So there's that element. And then the sales and marketing teams meet regularly, certainly the leaders of those teams, to talk about, okay, what is our plan for actually acting on these insights?
Yeah. Wonderful. And I guess ultimately there's probably also some salespeople who have to send some messages that aligns with what was actually on those screens inside of WeWork as they're trying to convince the CEOs and founders inside of WeWork, right?
Exactly. And the key is this can't be something, I see a lot of marketing teams make this mistake. You can't dictate it to a sales team. You're not guardians of the buyers. You can't be like, oh, we're marketing, we know. You should just do what we tell you. Because often when the salespeople want to close deals, if you're telling them to push a message and they're resisting it, there's usually a good reason. They're hearing something, they're getting some feedback that makes them feel like your message won't make them successful. So the right approach there is curiosity. It has to be co-developed. They have to look at the evidence together and align together on how to act and speak based on that evidence.
Wonderful, and that's probably the perfect plug to what I said a little while back about wanting to explore this topic of how do you go from like the theoretical buyer persona into the right messaging to these accounts. And probably the thing that I found the hardest is then also the valuation or the conclusions of whether you chose the right messaging or not. So can you maybe talk me through, Timmy, how kind of you take that kind of ICP and persona definition, and your website is very illustrious, and I like the copywriting that is done there. But how do we go from kind of this like very theoretical description of who we're targeting to what is actually the words that are put on the screen, and how do you know whether those are the right words?
That is a good question.
I struggle with it, so I'd love to hear your definition.
So the first thing I'll say, not to discourage you, but to increase your odds of success, is that it's hard. I think people misunderstand this. They expect it to be easy because of, the blog posts and the frameworks. Oh, just, just lean canvas it and you'll have your answer. It's not that simple. With Charlie, it's been a lot of people. Our copywriter who evolved into an experimentation manager, our product managers, our sales team, myself, our product marketing manager. It's been 2 years at least of changes across those orgs to hit the point where we are super effective at this. I will try and summarize some of the core components.
Yeah,
The first thing that I focused on was actually the operational elements to be able to answer the question. Our CEO often repeats at our company events that one of the first questions I asked when I joined, and I wrote a whole memo about it, is I asked, how do we grow? I asked multiple people. I was like, okay, things are going well, because I joined in 2021. Everything was booming post-COVID.
yeah.
And I asked, that's great. Things are going well. How are we growing? And I couldn't get a clear answer. So the first thing I felt I needed to do was build the infrastructure to actually be able to answer that question. So we set up an experimentation unit. So the ability to A/B test, split test, multivariate test, etc. We commissioned some market research to understand what are the sort of partitions and segments within our market, and what do they care about, and what are the trends. And then we started testing insights that we got from that market research. So we didn't just take it at face value, because research can be imperfect as well. So we're like, okay, based on this research, we had this insight come up. Is it true? So what our experimentation manager did is he rewrote our whole website, completely changed direction from where we are, our homepage, based on the insight from that research. And it's still one of our most successful experiments till date. And it's what actually started us on the journey of lasering in on our ICP, because we had a ton of assumptions about who the right buyer for Charlie was. When I say a ton, I mean a ton. And the information that we tested completely flew in the face of that, completely contradicted it. So we continued down that journey. Then the next thing is you start to audit your process as you start to get some signal. I don't have all the answers, but now we know, okay, there's a disconnect here. What we think internally is not really true. So we can start to question the things we're doing internally. So if we have a tactic or a strategy that is based on those assumptions that we had, you can start to ask, should we really be doing that? We're getting evidence that it's not actually in line. And a big part of the process is repeating that action. So generate an insight, test it based on the results, question what you're already doing. You have to kill a lot. You have to really, and not everyone's always happy with that. There's a lot of, I think this is one of the big parts that's overlooked. There's a lot of tension and conflict, and there was for me as well, because you're telling people to stop things that they really enjoy doing. And then you have to do that over time, over and over and over and over. And then we hit a point, this is probably one of the final phases, where we had so much insight from the experimentation alongside the evidence to say to our product team, can you go and analyze our customer base based on these parameters and tell us which one comes out on top? What are the attributes that define them? And that's how we uncovered our ICP.
That's really nice and sounds so simple on the other side, right?
I know, but I would say in some senses, it is simple. It's very simple in the sense that, look, a lot of people listening are highly intelligent people. It's not a question of brain power. I think it's a question of attitude and mindset. A lot of what I'm talking about here is tedious and painful.
Yeah.
Like after your 5th disagreement in 2 months, it's very easy to just be like, I can't be bothered. I think those are the obstacles that stop us. It's not because the process is so intellectually like complex.
Yeah.
It's just the experience of going through it, of questioning things, of sitting with the research, of like setting up your A/B testing platform and applying the right methodology. It's not exciting in the beginning.
Not always easy to win over opinionated stakeholders inside of your company, even though this is the perfect messaging now. But you still have to go convince the CEO or the CFO so everybody agrees that this is the path that we're trying now.
100%. And sorry, go
Yeah,
on.
no, it's just about, go ahead, Timi. I'll let you finish the last sentence here. Then I've already taken so much of your time, so I'll end it up after this one.
No worries. I just wanted to say the point you made about convincing is so important because even with me, I have a great relationship with my CEO. I love working with him. I think we make a great team. And I hope we continue to be a team for a long time. But even with us, we had disagreements in the beginning where essentially I had to bring ideas based on evidence. This is the key thing. This wasn't just because I wanted to do it. That flew in the face of what he believed and what he wanted. And to his credit, and to the credit of our board as well, they were vulnerable to evidence. So there was a lot of conversations that went like, I don't know about that. That doesn't make sense to me. But you have a lot of evidence. So I will let you try it and I will hold you accountable for these results. And I think that's the constructive way that's the place you want to get to. You don't have to change their mind. You just have to get them vulnerable to the evidence.
100%. I think that's a good way to end. Timi, normally I ask people to kind of re-pitch, but I can even remember it for you. So it's small UK companies below 50 employees with CEOs that are very busy that needs an HR tool. That's who CharlieHR are going to. If people want to get in contact with you, what's the best path here?
I'm not very active on social media, but LinkedIn is the one I'm most active on. So I'd say there.
Wonderful. And just to round it off, I would just want to say thank you to everybody who's been watching along, and thank you to those who listen to this as a podcast afterwards. If you like this conversation, go search for Attributed where you listen to podcasts, and you'll find more conversation with go-to-market people like Timi. So everybody, thank you so much for listening in. And Timi, particularly for you, thank you so much for sharing all your insights today.
We hope you like listening to us. Subscribe to our podcast and the ones that we have been guests on.
And if you have any feedback for us, just do let us know. And should there be a guest that you think we should be talking to, then pitch us.
We're looking forward to seeing you.